All right, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here once again, and welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast. As many of you already know, this is a show where we explore some of today's most creative minds in the music industry, and we try to basically explore what drives their passion, how they do what they do, and so that we can learn. Maybe pick up some things that inspire us. And today is definitely no exception because I have somebody who I love what they're doing. I love their musical style. I feel like they're taking a lot of elements from the pop sector that I really enjoy and fusing it in an interesting way to make it their own. And I am just excited to explore this man's history, career, all of it, and hopefully share some insights with you as well. I'm very excited. I have Mr. Saakb joining me today for a very cool conversation. How are you doing, man?
I'm great, man. How are you?
Doing good. Did I pronounce that correctly? Did I get that right?
It's close. It's not an easy name, and I've dealt with it my entire life. It's my real name. I spell it. My artist name is spelled a little bit differently. I tried to make it easier on the audience to make it more phonetic. Obviously that doesn't work for some, but that's okay. Listen, you're in the 90% who gets it wrong.
You know what though? To me, it's important that I get the names as close as possible because it's how we identify ourselves, and also it's a way to learn a little bit about each other's cultures. If you don't mind me asking you, what nationality is that name?
Well, my parents emigrated here from Pakistan in the early 1980s. So I was born in New York, but I have this very ethnic sounding name. Even though I don't, I'm very ethnically ambiguous visually. I don't really look Pakistani. I don't really look South Asian. I get
Yeah.
I get Hispanic. I get Middle Eastern. I get rarely do I get South Asian unless people actually see my name. And the name is the
Yeah.
indicator.
Interesting. You know what's interesting? I'm Guatemalan, right? So my
Mm.
parents immigrated from Guatemala here in the late 70s, maybe early 80s. I don't remember the exact years. But for me specifically, obviously my name isn't very difficult to pronounce. It is just simply Eddie. But I do feel like I fall sometimes, not always, under that ethnically ambiguous zone as well. Like
Mm.
I think if you've been around a lot of Hispanics before, or maybe even some Middle Eastern people, you can kind of tell, where the cultures lie. But in general, I feel like in my experience, especially here in Los Angeles, it can be difficult for some people to pin me down. Like, what are you? You might be Hispanic, you might be Middle Eastern, you might be Italian, even to some extent. But I always find that fascinating how like based on our names or cultures that sometimes it can help define who we are. But it's an interesting place that we're at right now, which is why I find it very. I just feel it's important to like understand where the names come from, the culture. That's kind of like my own little weird thing.
Has being ethnically ambiguous been a benefit to you? Do you think?
You know, that's a very interesting point. I gotta say, I've never really stopped to think about it, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
It's one of those things where in LA, specifically here, and actually, do you come out here a lot by any chance, like to LA?
Not a lot. I mean, I was out there this time last year actually,
Go-
and I had been there once before, but not very often.
Yeah. So in LA, I would say in the past, I mean, I'm 30 and I've lived here my whole life, but I've been everywhere. So I guess in these 3 decades that I've existed on in LA, I've seen dynamic shifts. And I would say that when I was first growing up, it didn't feel like there were a lot of, Hispanics or African American or other people of different cultures. But as I've gone older, I've recognized that it's a huge melting pot. So that being said, LA, did it benefit me being ethnically ambiguous? I don't really know specifically because LA is a very diverse
Hmm.
city,
Hmm.
but I would say that when I've gone to other places, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna say I do feel like I have been able to avoid some of the issues that other people, in my culture can sometimes suffer, depending on other states. And now that is a very interesting route to go through, but it is interesting to really like think about has that benefited me, to some extent. So I have to be honest and say it probably has
Hmm.
in other places. But what about you, if I can ask you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has. What's also helped with me, and my journey in America, living here, being born here, being raised in a pretty diverse part of New Jersey. What helps is that I had an assimilated American name. So we were all kids. I have three older sisters. My eldest sister gave us all like nicknames or assimilated names, and for some reason mine just stuck with me. So
Hmm.
growing up, all throughout high school, throughout college, some of my closest friends to this day, they call me Mikey, and Mikey is my assimilated name. It's my nickname. It's one of my identities, and I think that has also, it wasn't intentional, but it's lent itself to um, easing my way through post 9/11
Yeah.
relations with my peers. It's not
Yeah.
unless they see my full first name and last name and they know I'm from Pakistan, then they can make a judgment. It's not very again, you look at me, it's not very obvious that I come from a Muslim background and that my parents are from Pakistan.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you bring that up. If you don't mind me, do you mind me exploring that little side of it a little bit,
No,
like the whole
sure,
tidbit of,
sure.
because I love this. I never really get an opportunity to talk about this stuff, and I'm always open to learn. And listen, I don't know a lot about a lot of things, but I'm always keeping my ear to the ground because I want to learn from everybody because I think it's very important. That's how we move as a society. What's interesting about what you said, you mentioned post 9/11, and that's one of the things where I feel like, how old are you, if I can ask you?
I just turned 32.
Oh, okay. We're basically in the same age range. So
Right,
then you
right.
were like in middle school when 9/11 happened,
Yeah,
right?
I
You were
was
like in seventh, eighth grade?
I think everybody remembers the day they heard the news, right? I
Yeah.
was in 7th grade. Yeah.
Seventh grade. Okay. I
Yeah.
think I was in fifth or sixth. I don't remember what the grade was,
I
but I
remember.
remember going into school and then like by second period or something, it was very clear that something had happened. Obviously we were kids technically, but we all knew something serious had happened. But
Mhm.
anyways, fast forwarding, I do feel like the concept of 9/11 is something that everyone as an American knows, and maybe even internationally, but it's kind of seen as something that happened and it's moved on. In to someone that hasn't suffered prejudice along those lines. Now, I bring this up because I have a good friend of mine who we're business partners in many things, and he is Indian,
Mhm.
and we talk about very frequently some of the things that his family went through post 9/11. And they were in Nashville for a little while, and then he relocated to Los Angeles later on. But anyways, he just has given me little snippets of what it felt like to grow up in this post 9/11 world, being darker colored. I don't want to say brown, but
Mhm.
I think that's kind of the classification.
Yeah.
And being looked at as like, wow, you're an enemy of this country, even though no one ever stopped to ask, what's going on. So I guess where I'm heading with this is I want to know if it's okay with you. I'd like to ask you, post 9/11, did you and your family ever experience any sort of, I don't want to say persecution, but what was it like and what did it feel like? Did you guys ever experience any sort of adversity from neighborhoods, being from New Jersey and stuff? I imagine it was very touchy over there. I don't know. Is it okay for me to ask? Because I want to learn a little bit what
Sure,
that must
sure,
have been
sure.
like.
So I had the benefit of growing up in a relatively small but diverse town in New Jersey called Metuchen, and um, it's primarily white at the time, um, but there was still some diversity. A good percentage of my classmates were black. I had a few other South Asian, Pakistani, Indian um, classmates as well. Some Arab, Muslim classmates and peers. And again, I had the benefit of being called Mikey, instead of
Right.
going by Saakb. Um, for me personally, I am a little privileged that I went through post 9/11, high school, middle school, college, unscathed.
Hmm.
I navigated those waters pretty well. I never really faced any sort of overt discrimination. Maybe once when I was in 7th grade, some kid may have called me a terrorist, and you know
Hmm.
I don't I don't know if that actually happened because to me it's never happened. But that's not to say that it doesn't happen because I have very very close friends who are less ethnically ambiguous who have gone through multiple instances of racism. Um, due to their just because of the color of their skin. Indian
Yeah.
Indian friends of mine who are not Muslim, Sikh friends of mine who are not Muslim who have tons of trouble because of the way they look, and obviously because of their names. So it may have happened to my sisters a couple of times as well. My sisters are also they look very similar to me. They're very ethnically ambiguous, but I think women can be or girls can be a little bit more conniving towards each other. So may have been more instances of racism that they've had to encounter, but I've been, knock on wood, I've been okay.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear that because you're clearly making some things happen, which I want to explore. But what's interesting about what we're talking about now, I try my best to explore where everyone has come from, where it's whether they're from this country, whether they're from somewhere else. I feel like the art that you put out to the world, a lot of it and its inspiration can be traced back to a lot of things that happened to you or that you experience as you grow up. I feel like that's self-explanatory. I think most people know that. But the thing about 9/11 and that whole thing that happened, it kind of leads into like a little bit of what we're dealing with now,
Hmm.
especially in this country. And this is specifically for the U.S. I know that we have other listeners from other countries, so this is kind of like one of those things where it's like a family problem. You know what I mean? Like it's when you're
Right.
here, there's a lot of issues that happen here, and they tend to leak out. But what's interesting is feeling this dynamic of where we're currently in. And again, this is not necessarily an avenue we need to explore super deeply, but I think it's important. Me being Guatemalan, I feel like growing up, kind of adding to what I said earlier, I didn't feel like I necessarily had a lot of problems growing up, especially being ethnically ambiguous here in LA. But I will be honest, and I feel like I have to edit what I said earlier. I definitely did have some advantages being ethnically ambiguous, but I remember just like 4 years ago, when the whole regime change and everything, when a lot of adversity started rising towards, like Mexican American immigrants and that
Hmm.
whole thing,
Hmm.
it created this very interesting dynamic amongst Hispanics. And I'm going to tell you why. Because a lot of the older Hispanics, people that have been here for a while, whether they're immigrants or not, but a lot of people that came around my parents' time, they can be very diehard Republican. And it's an interesting thing to explore. So, needless to say, long story short, my parents and many people in their generation are diehard Trump supporters,
Hmm.
which was interesting coming from a candidate that's very much like pro immigration, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, my point being is I find myself in this place where a lot of my creative choices can sometimes be influenced by this uneasiness that I feel towards the political climate that we're currently in. And I guess what I want to know a little bit is for you specifically, since you're a musician and you're making some really cool stuff, at least at this point in time, does it affect your creativity? Feeling, kind of how uncertain a lot of things are, feeling the tensions between things, especially, in your culture, it's kind of been engraved. And I really hate to say it, but I feel like I'm not wrong in saying it, but please feel to correct me if I am wrong. I feel like it is kind of has been engraved in the American culture to not like Middle Eastern cultures to some extent. You know what I mean? And I could be wrong, but that's at least what I've understood based on the news and stuff that I've watched. So
Yeah,
I guess what
sure.
I'm asking is, how does that affect your creativity, and does it influence you whatsoever? Does it actually push you forward? I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah, so I tend to not write about social justice issues, but
Hmm.
I couldn't help myself, back in June and back in July, especially with the death of George Floyd and the video and all of the chaos afterwards. I couldn't help but empathize with the situation, and I was hurt very deeply by it. Um,
Yeah.
to see someone, so terribly murdered. I mean,
Mistreated.
yeah,
Yeah.
mistreated for sure. And I guess people will say the murder is up for debate. I'm not really sure about that, but it seemed pretty obvious to me that what that officer did to him was it looked um, bad. If it was, listen, it may have been. There may be people who say that it was still allowed under
Just, yeah.
justified, allowed under the
Like
rules,
legally allowed.
legally
Yeah.
allowed, but just from a human standpoint, human to human, it looks terrible. No one should have to endure that kind of suffering for an unjust reason. So, um, all that being said, I watched that video, like millions of others Americans have watched it, and I felt very pained by it, and I wrote something about it. I never released it. I think it may be floating around on my SoundCloud, but I did write something about it, and then I wrote another song, about division and how in my opinion, the media is trying to divide the nation. And I really do feel that way, that we have such a strong left wing and right wing um,
Yeah.
media, where there's no middle ground. It's you're either anti-Trump or you're pro-Trump. I mean, there's nothing in between. You're either pro-racism or anti-racism, according to the media. I mean, there's nothing in between, and that causes division. If people are constantly absorbing that information, it's going to naturally just divide you. So I myself have taken a step back. For a long time, I stopped watching cable television and cable news, and I'll still stay informed about what's happening in the United States and in the world by reading some articles. But I'm very conscious about keeping a balanced perspective, because again, it's very easy to be influenced, and I think the influence is driving us towards division right now.
Yeah, and it is interesting that we live in this time period where, and again, I haven't been around for very long. 30 years is obviously seen as old to some people, but I feel like 30 years to me and you, I'm not sure if you agree, but I don't feel like it's that long, on this earth to at least like
No,
see
I
the
mean,
huge vast differences.
absolutely. I still feel like a kid.
I know, same here. I don't feel 30, that's for sure.
Yeah, or at least what
but
we think 30 is supposed to be. Yeah, I
I
don't
know.
feel that.
You got to thank all those 90s cartoons. They made us feel like a
Mm,
30-year-olds were like these giants, super, had everything figured out and all that,
right.
which some do, honestly. But I don't know. Like you bring up an interesting point where I don't ever remember, being in high school or even in my early 20s and feeling super divided like we are now.
Mm,
And again, this isn't a political podcast, but I'm kind of leading somewhere with this, which I find that because I run this music podcast, Saki, we get like thousands of submissions a day for like musics and interviews and all that.
yeah.
And, so we get the opportunity to really explore, what people are thinking, where the music is kind of going. So it's a very interesting position to be in. And I remember since the lockdown, we've noticed this huge influx in, I don't want to say, what do you call it? Not political music. It isn't political music, but it's just music about causes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not to say that there never is music about that. It just all of a sudden happened like a whole bunch all at once over these past like maybe 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, for sure.
And especially now with like the election here in America, there's a lot of politically themed music. And I, like you, I do my best to kind of separate myself because there's just so much I have to do that the last thing I want to do is worry about politics, at least until it's time. I'm generally sometimes curious to hear what artists think and what listeners think to see if it actually affects, and if you feel like by putting your effort and creativity into talking about what you feel towards division, towards political, whatever, do you feel like that music that you make that can come out of not just you, but I mean in general, do you feel like it can actually have an impact in how people feel and how they vote and how they act towards others? Like you personally, have you seen that actually help someone? Because I really don't know. And that's something that's always piqued my curiosity, if like political statements or songs about, preventing division, would that actually resonate with someone who's on the cusp of actually feeling divided or not, if that makes sense. And it's a broad question. I'm sorry. It's a broad question.
No, that's fine. I think it's relative to what else we see. So if we see George Floyd getting murdered, and then we see a young black kid named, I think his name is Kedron Bryant. He had that song, "I just wanna live, God protect me." So,
God
and
damn
that
those
went.
vocals.
Oh, no,
Great trills, man. That was great.
no. But that kid, he's amazing.
Yeah, he is good.
And
He's really good.
and that clip went viral, and it was very genuine. You could tell it was when he was singing it. It was very genuine. And that kind of, seeing a young black kid sing about, I guess, just being a black person, being a black child in America, and how dangerous that is. That does have an impact, and it does resonate with people. It
Yeah.
absolutely does. Um, I'm not saying that it, it it may be the guiding force towards informing your decision, but it also
Mm.
it's not the only thing that we see. We're inundated with everything, with imagery from all over the place, with opinion pieces from every single news source. So our opinions are not informed by one person; they're informed by the general consensus. I think
Yeah, by the collective, so to
by the
speak.
collective,
And
for sure.
yeah, and you're absolutely right in bringing that up because I do feel like where we're currently in and what has happened has encouraged so many people to share a similar message that it does feel like there's this huge force kind of pushing that message forward. I was having a conversation with Johannes. He's the lead singer of this metal band called Avatar, based in Sweden, and we were having a similar type conversation, but about something else. But he brought up how even though he considers himself more on the progressive side of things, and we were talking about the history of music, he briefly mentions how what were we talking? We were talking about the Vietnam War and how there was like a lot of classic songs that came out of that era, that were about the Vietnam War,
Hmm.
about freedom and stop the war, blah blah blah. And he brought up an interesting point that if you look hard enough, you'll find tons of music that were for the war, or not necessarily for the war, but that were like the anti-war movement.
Interesting.
And it is interesting how historically, because now we see the war as like a bad thing, or maybe it wasn't the our highlight. We don't really remember a lot of that artwork, because it is artwork
Hmm.
or art forms that came out of that time that were, I guess against anti-war. So the question is, or at least where I'm kind of like interested in is right now there's a lot of music that are trying to, spread progressive thoughts and, showcase, the issues that we're having with police and all of that. But I am willing to bet that there's probably tons of music coming out right now on the other side that you and I are probably not hearing because obviously those aren't our tastes, so we're not being fed that music by the algorithms and whatnot.
Hmm.
But I imagine that there's tons of music coming out, that's more right wing, so to speak. And the question is that music also influencing others to kind of stand against what you believe in, and is that kind of a good thing? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, is it a good or bad thing? Because with music, I feel like music is an interesting form where no matter who makes it, it is a bit of an international language that everyone can understand based on how it sounds and how it feels. So I don't know, I guess I'm just wondering how much impact music can have overall on the collective if both sides are pushing against each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it depends one on what everyone is hearing. So if the collective is listening to Spotify's playlists, they're likely going to hear songs that are more progressive and more left leaning, which is fine. But I would think that ultimately, I'll say this, right? Music is what people turn to for catharsis. So
Mm.
if you're feeling a certain way about something, whether it's heartbreak or if you're feeling oppressed or any sort of emotion, there's likely going to be music for that. And more often than not, someone will seek music that will help them feel those emotions, process those emotions, and so I really do think that if music like that does exist, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that if there is music out there that is politically related on either side, it'll help people who feel that way. And it's not right or wrong
Mm.
to feel anyway. If you feel um, a certain way for something or against something, you have every right as a human being to feel that way. And if there's music out there to help you process those emotions, then I think ultimately that's a good thing.
Yeah. No, and I love that. That is a beautifully constructed answer. I think you're right. I think at the end of the day, music is not really wrong or right. It's just an expression of an emotion. I'm curious. This is a completely random side note, but when it comes to the emotions that you get from music, you specifically, what do you look for when you are feeling certain things? And by that, I mean, well, let me phrase it this way. I was talking to this artist named Kayvon, and he was telling me how lately he's been focusing on how many he's been having a hard time. Let's just leave it at that.
Mhm.
So the average thing is I think people will listen to sad music to like make themselves feel better, but he figured out that he's the opposite. He would much rather listen to uplifted, happy, super atmospheric, airy music to help him feel better. For you specifically, what do you find yourself aligning towards to when you need to feel something? So if you were feeling sad, do you like listening to sad music, or do you seek out happy music, or maybe you seek out very random music? I don't know, but do you find yourself looking for certain things when you need to get an emotion, or need to like feel something, or deal with a feeling?
Yeah, I think it's more so for the happier emotions. So if I want to dance, I'll put on, some of my favorite dance songs of all time. I don't usually seek out new music. I usually, for me, music is more of it's something that I associate with positive emotions, and so I'll look for music that I grew up listening to. So, I'll seek out a Michael Jackson song if I want to get in a sexy dancey mood, but that doesn't happen very often, right? So
Right.
most of the time it's yeah, especially nowadays with COVID, no one, unless you're
I
dancing,
know, man.
unless you're dancing in your home, which I do actually. I do sometimes, just when I'm alone, I'll dance around a little bit, which is
Same here. I'll do the moonwalk across my living room floor.
right,
I can
right.
I can actually do it, believe it or not.
Oh, that's awesome. Same. That's great.
Hell yeah.
That's great. I mean, I can't really. I mean, the mechanics aren't really there anymore. But I growing up, in high school in my dusty hallways, I would often be seen moonwalking and gliding and all that stuff.
Oh man, dude, I had to teach myself that stuff. I would just watch the videos. I watched Smooth Criminal at least 1,000 times to
Oh
try and
yeah,
get the whole dance routine. That's an intricate dance routine.
right.
So you put on music when you want to dance. You put on dance music.
I'm getting better about writing that type of music as well. My latest song or the song that I've put out in August, "Move Until You're Numb," is like a happier, dancier song. Even though the lyrics are a bit melancholic,
Hmm.
the song itself is still up tempo. It's uplifting. So I'm trying to write more songs like that. But usually when I'm feeling, upset about my relationship, or upset about anything really, I'll write my own music. So I'll sit down and I'll sing melodies, and I'll write lyrics to it to get to process those emotions. I rarely turn to existing music for those types of emotions. I've gotten
Yeah.
so used to processing those emotions myself.
Can I ask you something random? I got this question a couple weeks ago by a random listener who is not a musician, but they're very interested in this kind of stuff. And I kind of want to bring it up to you because I feel like we're in this very cool space when we're talking about how music, helps us feel, or how we make music when we feel. How does music specifically help you process your emotions when you're making it? Because that is something that, as a musician, I understand what it feels like to sit on the drums or to produce a song when I'm feeling whatever, whether I'm feeling excited, happy, sad,
Hmm.
and, I put that energy into creating something. I feel this like release afterwards, I guess you can say. But
Hmm.
for you specifically, I'm wondering, when you have to process emotions, or when you're creating something that is being driven by your emotions, how does that help you deal with it? If you don't mind me exploring that a little bit.
Sure. So I'll give you an example. So when I get in a fight with my girl, what'll usually happen is, like, there's just so many thoughts and feelings flowing through my body that it's like, for me, writing music helps me art- articulate what I'm actually feeling. It helps me really understand myself. If
Mm,
it's understand the situation that I'm in, understand the history that I have with this relationship, um, and it really allows me to get the bigger picture. So it's yeah, that's what it is. It just allows me to process and understand what it is that I'm feeling. Otherwise, if I didn't have music as an outlet, or some sort of artistic output as an outlet, I would likely just um, react in ways that were irrational. I would probably be, who knows, if, like, I would turn to violence, or I would turn,
ooh,
yeah, who knows? Like, I don't know what would happen if I didn't have this creative outlet. Some people turn to therapy, right? For me, music is therapy.
right.
Music is therapy for me. It's the way for me to really center myself.
Right. Have you ever been prone to violence yourself, like in the past when you were younger?
Yeah, I never fought with people, but there are in my older house there are lots of drywalls that I've punched.
Oh man, dude, yes, I
You know?
love that. There's sometimes you got to take out your aggression like that. But I think the idea is you kind of learn to grow to deal with those things. Now, here's what I'm curious about: when you are seeing the bigger picture, or actually, even let me backtrack a little bit. When you write music, when you're feeling certain things, whether you're feeling like angry or you had a fight or whatever it was, do you then set out on a mission to write a song in order to deal with your emotions, or is that just kind of an outcome that happens naturally?
It's an outcome that happens naturally. It's not like, oh, I need to write a song about this.
Mm,
It's just like, sometimes it's I'll go back to my relationship. So sometimes it's like, we'll have a fight and we'll talk about it, or we'll fight about it, and we'll fight about it for days via text or in person. Like we'll just continue going back and forth, and then eventually it's like, oh, I'll take the um if I'm sitting down in the studio and I'm writing something, I'll use that as my perspective. Like I'll try to gain further perspective, because of the situation that I'm going through.
yeah, was there ever an instance where it actually helped you to like see, like maybe you're in a fight or maybe
Mm.
you were having an issue with somebody, and by writing a song or maybe even just working on something creatively, was there ever a situation where it actually helped you see the other side, and maybe you came out of it being like, oh, you know what, maybe I need to compromise a little, or maybe it made you see something that you didn't see before?
Yeah, there's this song that my girl hates, so I'm never gonna release it. It's called
Smart
she
man.
she hates it. It's called Options, and it was last summer, I I had just started gaining traction on Instagram, and people were following me like crazy, and I was getting a lot of attention, a lot of female attention. And for the first time in my life, I was getting a lot of female attention. And
Mm,
um at the
that's
same
hard, man.
it
That can be
is
tough.
it is and at the same time, things between me and my girl weren't really established. She was coming off of a relationship, and she and I have been together on and off for 11 years now. But she was coming off of a long-term relationship, and she and I um were establishing something. But at the same time, I'm getting this attention, and I wanted to explore it a little bit. So I wrote a song called Options, saying that uh, uh, I got options, you have them too. Um, but the song is, I got options, you got them too, baby, baby, but I got my eyes on just you. So just saying like, hey, you have options, I have options, but I'm choosing you. Like that. This is
Yeah.
You are the person that I'm going to. So, but it took me writing that song for me to really just understand that, uh, having having female attention isn't, uh, and acting on female attention isn't necessarily the right thing to do. Ultimately, the right thing to do is to be with the person that you love, and choose that person and be faithful to that person. And so that song, along with other conversations with my friends and conversations with my girl, helped me realize, it's important to be faithful.
That's really, really fascinating, man. I love that you came out of that with this like new insight. And here's what's interesting about that is I personally feel like I'm a huge advocate for you doing whatever makes you feel happy, but it's to me it's all about responsibility too, and that's a can of worms for some other time. But like the idea is, whatever makes you happy, go for it. But there is sort of this decision you have to make of, who is going to be affected by what you choose to do, and you kind of have to be able to confront that and be honest with yourselves and be honest with people around you. And I love that you kind of found this new way of thinking, or at least you understood why you were feeling what you were feeling, and then you made that choice. Very often I find artists, not just people in general, but artists trapped in this emotional bubble. And I'm not going to say every artist. It's I would say it's a little more rare, but I have encountered a handful of people who, because they're creative people, it can be very easy to fall into these little like emotional loops. And we can even use the girl attention as an example. How when you're gaining traction and you're becoming successful, that's almost like a thing that happens. You will start to get attention because people are attracted to that. So then the question becomes, what do you do with that? And I find that there are many, I guess we can say men as an example, both men and women, who kind of get trapped in this emotional hell, so to speak, because you like what you're getting, you like this feeling, but you're also tasked as a human being to kind of confront a lot of these feelings and decide for yourself what is good for you or not. And the healthy thing is to really like understand why you might want to make choices and decide and, be okay with that. But it can be very easy to not even confront it and just go with the motions, and I'm with this person and with that person, and this girl likes me, so whatever. Again, I'm not trying to be all preachy about it, but
Yeah.
for me, I guess what I'm curious about is what was it about, or I guess what was it that helped you to come to terms with your decision making and mature a little bit? Was it the music? Was it the combination of friends and music? Was it you kind of searching within yourself? Because the music definitely helps, and it might have been just the music, but you also seem to kind of be at this place where you've understood your choices and you're working with them, if that makes sense. And
No, for
I'm
sure.
wondering how it is that you came across that and how others haven't in your same age group.
It took a lot of heartache. Ultimately, what happened was, I did end up exploring, those the female attention, and
Mm.
I ended up exploring my own power. And it's one of those things where it's like, you know, not a lot of men get to experience that type of power, and I I got to experience it, and not that
And
I
by
ever.
the power, you mean like attraction by a lot of women
Right,
because of the
right.
music, right?
Right. It's just the power of attraction. And
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to a lot of men. It doesn't happen to a lot of people at all. I think being attractive to so many people. So it took me exploring that, and but realizing how lonely I was, and how much I missed being with my girl, and being um I ultimately I chose love. I chose the person that I was um so in love with, that I had established this history with, that I knew better than anyone else, and who knew me better than anyone else. It took a lot of tears. It took a lot of you know restless nights, and a lot of songwriting, um, and a lot of conversations with close friends for me to realize that it's it's okay to have that power, and to acknowledge that you have that power. Um, but ultimately, it's best if you don't act on it.
Yeah.
So it's tough, man. It really is. And here's the thing, right? I'm not a well-known person. I'm not a celebrity by any means. I have, 20,000 followers, on Instagram, who are like 1,000 of them are engaged. You know what I mean? So it's not I'm not this.
That's a pretty good number, though, man. You'd be surprised.
Sure, but ultimately it's like, it's not that's not a lot of
Right.
it's not fame. If there's it's not the type of fame that others have. So I don't know if it's made me realize that I don't know if I want to have that type of fame as well, because with
Mm.
that fame comes that power, and that it, it can ultimately be very, very difficult to avoid using that power.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I do feel like, I mean, you hear it all the time. You hear it all the time with any kind of celebrity, both men and women, when they're catapulted from, obscurity to overnight success, or not even overnight. It could be a gradual success, but there is like a tipping point where you just get so successful that it's almost unreal, the kind of attention that you're getting, the
Right.
kind of power, so to speak, the power of attraction that you have about yourself. And I've always wondered that, like I've always wondered how somebody as big as, I don't know, Drake or The Weeknd or whatever, like people at the very, very, very top, I imagine that they just ignore it after a certain point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, after a certain point, I'm sure it gets old. And it's
Yeah.
or maybe it doesn't, right? You hear stories of, Weekend writes about it. He writes about how many women he has sex with, and rock stars have written about it for years. And some people love it, and some people are just they acknowledge that it's there, and some people can't stand it.
Yeah. For you, do you feel like the path that you chose, the choices that you've made thus far, were they, I guess, part of the plan? I guess you can say, like, looking back at it now, do you feel like all the choices that you made, both to explore your options and to make a decision, were those in a way like perfectly aligned to who you needed to be? Or do you ever look back and feel like, you know what, I could have done without that choice and been just fine. But I don't know. I'm wondering if like this ability and this opportunity to actually explore what you can do and then make a decision based on that. I feel like that sounds healthier than just never exploring it at all. But I'm wondering for you, what do you feel about that?
No, I agree with that. I mean, obviously, there's some form of regret for putting the person that I love the most through all that pain. At the same time, I think it's good to know that that kind of power exists, and I have a choice whether or not I want to use that. And ultimately, I decided that I don't want to use that power, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known that had I not experienced it.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting that I've met several people who, I don't know how to describe them, but there are people out there who are just born with this instinct. Like they just kind of know what they want to do and what they don't want to do without necessarily trying anything. And that is something that I've always been a little, not envious, but I've always been curious about it, how somebody can have this sort of gut feeling that nope, that's not right for me. Yes, this is right for me, and not in a stubborn way. Like I've encountered people who just kind of know, and this topic always comes up, and people in that spectrum are usually on either side. Some people know that they need exploration. Some other people just know like right away, like nope, I only need this person, that person, that's it. And so I've always been I always admired that, but I do feel like most of us kind of need the opportunity to be able to just, and I'm not even just talking about relationships, I'm talking about in general, just options to just really explore and know who we are.
Mhm.
What I'm wondering about you, all these decisions that you've made so far and the growth that you've clearly have made, and you even mentioned how that kind of power and fame may not even be something that you want to do. Ideally, where would you want your career to go then? If it's not, and again, I'm not saying that you don't want to be successful or famous, whatever, but it can be very intimidating once you've seen a snippet of what it could be like to have a life like Drake or Kanye or whatever.
Right.
Do you still want that lifestyle, or do you want something in between? Is the question, I guess.
There are parts of it that I want. Um,
Mm.
you know,
Which parts?
the parts of it that I want are um, the financial independence, um, the ability to reach millions of people, and having millions of people uh, relate to your music. Those are the parts that I want.
Yeah.
Or to just to have music out there that touches and can be used by millions of people. Um, you know, it's it's uh it's selfish and it's selfless at the same time. I I don't want the celebrity that comes with it.
Mm.
Maybe. So it was funny. The I was watching Dave Chappelle's interview with David Letterman.
David Letterman?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and he said something that resonated with me. And among he said a dozen things over time that have resonated with me. But in that particular interview, he said that I enjoy having the fame. I don't want to be a celebrity, or something along the lines. And
Mm.
and then he noted the difference between the two, and they are different. Being famous for something is different than being a celebrity and eating into the celebrity machine. And
Yeah.
I absolutely do not want that. Um, I'm honestly, I'm very happy with who I am today, and if it continues to grow, if I continue to reach a much larger audience, that would be great. But I'm not going to actively seek it um, and then receive all of the consequences that come with that type of career.
Yeah. You're currently independent, right?
I am, yes.
Got it. So the opportunity ever came up where a major, or maybe not even a major, but an entity, a label of some sort, had the resources to help you, catapult to that level. but that was like the only option. Like they were strategically trying to help you become that next big musical star. Is that something that you would consider? Or would you have, your own contingencies? Would you be like, what, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that? I imagine most artists would, but as things go, I guess it's a very it's a very funny and general question, but like the idea being is if that option were available to you relatively soon, would you take it and then maybe leave? Or I don't know, but I'm curious. And your choices can always change. That's the thing. Like
Yeah.
to me, I'm always poking these random questions to everybody because it's fun to try and like imagine and see what if, But it doesn't mean you will do it. But I'm wondering, like, knowing what you know now, knowing the power that you've had, and seeing what you've experienced, and without any effort, someone would be like, "Hey, you could be an overnight sensation for maybe a year or two. Would you do it?" You know?
Yeah, I don't. I still don't know the answer to that question. It's something that I've gone back and forth on for a very long time because, again, I understand the benefit of having the machine behind you,
Yeah.
to be able to reach millions of people. It's
It's a brutal machine, though,
it
man.
is, it is, and I also understand that. I understand the consequences of being a part of that machine, and what it can do to yourself and to your personal relationships. And I don't know if it's worth losing everything that I've built to this point. Um, and I'm afraid that that's a consequence of being a part of that machine. I'm afraid that I won't be able to be in a healthy relationship with the person that I love because of the machine, because of those pursuits. So it's I don't have a yes or a no answer whether or not I would do that. It hasn't been placed in front of me, so I'm grateful that I haven't had to make that choice yet. Um, and I likely won't know the answer unless that is an option for me.
Yeah. Do you think it's actually possible to have a very fulfilling and balanced, and that's the key, balanced life when you eat into the celebrity machine? Because you're right. People talk about it all the time, and I'm not someone who likes to speculate or just to say what I hear. I personally feel like when it comes to the music industry, I'm somewhere in the middle. Like I understand the pros and the cons, and I'm always a huge advocate for everyone doing what is best for them. And I've known plenty of people on both sides, people that have greatly benefited from being a part of the machine and they're enjoying their life. But I've also known people on the opposite side who have tried the machine and it's destroyed their
Mhm.
life. And so I guess the question is the machine exists for a reason and it kind of depends on who you are, whether it's going to benefit you or not. But is it possible to actually have a super balanced life with with meaningful relationships, with a healthy family life, whatever you want to include in there, and still like eat into that machine? I don't know. Like, do you feel like that is possible? Is it super rare? Is it very difficult to do? I don't know.
I My inkling is that it's not possible. But that's a question that would have to be asked for someone who, um, asked to someone who's been through that machine, and see if they're happy with who they are when they came out of it.
Yeah. What do you see as the machine, by the way? And I know we're going to start talking about your projects here very soon,
Sure.
but as an independent artist who's kind of experiencing some success yourself, which is well earned because your music is
Thank you.
phenomenal, and the little tidbits of you singing on this podcast is absolutely phenomenal.
Thanks.
A little treat for all the listeners because you have some great pipes, man.
It's not like I don't do that to show off. I it's for
No, it's
me.
just natural to you. It's like me. I'm a drummer. I tap on shit.
Yeah. So from the outside looking in, and from someone who's been, listening from the door, so to speak. I have my ear against the door, and I'm looking through the peephole, and I'm seeing what's happening inside. You know, I my understanding of the machine is that you are instantly put in front of the most influential people in the entertainment industry, the people who have access to the most people. So you'll instantly be considered for a top Spotify playlist, so your music can get heard. You'll
Mm,
instantly um, be put on radio. You can't get on radio unless in the United States, at least, you can't get on radio unless you're part of a record label or a major record label. Sometimes it's you can get on radio, on indie radio, with being a part of an indie record label, but there's got to be some sort of label involved just to just have radio exposure. Um, and and then there's television as well. So getting opportunities um, that i- that are with like you know big news networks, or just getting a part of that PR machine. That PR machine isn't really accessible to everyone. Um,
Right.
it's not really accessible to the outside world. You can't really like Google a good PR company and that have access to the NPRs and the nightly daily shows that happen, the Tonight Show, the Late Night Show. All of that stuff is primarily the people who have priority access to those outlets of distribution are the people who own the major record labels. So to me, that's the machine. Like the machine can it does exist. People say that it doesn't exist, but it does exist. You can be instantly put in front of millions of people, and they can then
Right.
decide whether or not you have a career. If the audience likes you, then they'll listen to your music. They'll come to your shows when we have shows.
I know.
They'll come to your shows. Think about it this way, right? How many independent bands or artists sell out Madison Square Garden? Not many. I think Wolfpack was the last independent band
Wolfpack did. Yep.
but
Yep. Good little bit of trivia right
yeah,
there, actually. Yeah, they're like
y-
one of the only ones
yeah,
who've ever
yeah,
done
but
that.
not everyone else is a part of a major label, So, so I understand that, and I'm wrestling with that choice, even though they haven't come to me, right? I'm not sitting here saying that I've been offered all these contracts and I've turned them down. No, because I haven't been presented that opportunity. But I'm preparing myself because I understand my power. I understand that my music is good. That I have a unique voice that a lot of people just from Instagram and Facebook and me advertising to them, a lot of people enjoy. So I understand that I can be a part of the machine, and from the outside looking in, I'm just wrestling with those choices, knowing that that's what it puts you through. Is there something do you think I'm missing? Is there something else that you think the machine does? Do you think the machine even exists? This is from my perspective.
I absolutely think you described it in a very accurate way. I think the machine, or the music industry or whatever people want to call it, it's a very extensive machine. Like there's a lot of little sub things that are going on behind closed doors that aren't usually explained, but the general gist of it, I think you got it. Like the idea being that when you want something heard, the idea is distribution. How do you distribute that? And that doesn't just mean CDs. That means literally, like you described, media outlets. That means streaming now. That means videos. That means all of it. And when you're a big company with tons of finances, you can do that overnight. You can have a team of 20 people to all come up with artwork, branding, ideas, a commercial, whatever it is that you want. You have the opportunity to do that. But some people would argue that, it's a company, and they're essentially an advertising company or like a media company, and that's what they do. That they try their best to create giant movements, so to speak, and they have to select people to be part of that giant movement. Anyways, my point being is I think you covered it pretty well. And I feel like for me, I'm not gonna say who. I'm not gonna say names. I know I've named a couple people on the episode, but I think they're cool with it. But in general, what I've learned from people that have had successes with the machine, so to speak, they have always said that there is this sort of balance that you have to strike. So the gist of it is that you're somebody who really wants control of what they're doing, and you don't want to be told what to do, and your identity is 100% important to you, then the machine is probably not the best option at first. But if you're somebody who is a creative person, but you're very good with teamwork and you're very good at like compromising, because what I've heard is that it isn't that it's evil. Like there are very few executives who are like legitimately evil and just want to destroy you. That's not the case. The case is that it's about money. So the idea is a lot of executives want to work with people who understand that there is a sort of budget, there's a business model, and if you can have some leeway with your creativity, then you'll do just fine. Then they'll be more than
Hmm.
happy to work with you. That's what I have learned. So the people that have had a good time, that have had success and have like, had a pretty good career, they're individuals who naturally are very good at teamwork. That's what I've picked up on. But if you're independent and super like your way has to be your way, or not even that way, but it's just your creativity is so interesting and so unique that it needs to be done a certain way. It can be a hit or miss.
Right.
That's what I've learned, Interesting fucking stuff, man. But like, to be honest, I feel like someone like you, and especially in this day and age, independent artists, in my opinion, are starting to thrive a little. With social media and internet and stuff like that, it's still very difficult and it's still very saturated. But I do feel like being independent is kind of starting to compete with, being part of a major. And so for you, I'm assuming you want to continue staying that independent route, at least until way down the line, until you become like bigger or something.
Yeah,
like that, right?
I'm not against teaming with other people, but there are these historical music industry practices where, um, with ownership of the master recordings that they haven't died yet.
Yep.
And
Those are still very much alive.
yeah, and I don't know if I have enough leverage to negotiate in my favor. So it's been tough to um to even think about joining a team, because I do want to keep my master recordings, not just my publishing, but
Yeah.
my master recordings. I've had to, out of necessity, learn the music industry, and I know how predatory it's been. Um, so I again, I'm okay with it. I would love to be a part of a team, for sure. It's just, um, I don't want to give up everything in order to do so. So yeah, being independent has been great for that, because we do have access to certain tools, not all of the tools, but there are certain tools of distribution that at least are available to independent artists, such as Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter, all the social medias. And we technology is accessible. I'm sitting here recording this podcast in front of my Pro Tools rig that is running off my computer. So this is how I record my music, and I get great music from producers all over the world via BeatStars or through Instagram, through connecting with producers. So the creativity process isn't difficult anymore, at least on the music side. And the accessibility to an audience, at least a small audience, is still there for me. So I'm content. If I wake up tomorrow and I want to have a number one on Billboard, that's a different story. Then I have to actively seek
Right.
a team that would help me in that direction.
Yeah, and finding a team that actually believes in your vision fully, that is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, it's possible and it does exist. But it's like with any business, it's like with any sort of enterprise that you want to start. At the end of the day, it's about finding that group of people that believe in what you're trying to do and will see it through. That's the same thing with music, but I will say it is harder with music, because you're not just selling a phone, you're not selling a product. It's legitimately someone's expression that you're selling.
Yeah.
And that's where that's where I feel like a lot of people have the problems. And that's where I will admit where I feel like it can get shady with, how you can treat other people's expressions. There's a way to do it. And I feel like there's people out there that know how to do it right. At least like in a way where it's like business, where it's fair. But there's definitely plenty of people that don't do it fairly, and that's where I don't condone that. And that's a topic that you can dive down for hours, But I think the idea at the end of the day, the takeaway, which I feel like you're way ahead on, is to really just understand what you need. What do you need when it comes to your music career and your creativity? If you need that independence, that control, there's plenty of tools for you to use and to be creative with. But if you are someone who really needs a team, and I mean it, like you really need a team, and really ask yourself why you need it, then yeah, maybe like the label route is better. But it all depends on who you are. And I think the important thing is that you know who you are and you know what you're getting out of your work, and it's clearly working for you, man. I love it.
Thanks. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I just started doing this 3 years ago, and I'm 32 years old. So I couldn't imagine being like a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old doing this, because what 15 or 16-year-old knows who they are?
Yeah, dude. See, that's the important thing right there. That's where it's like, that's one of the deep parts right there, because you are taking teenagers essentially and having them sell a product. Like that's basically what it is. And the music industry isn't the only industry that does that, but it's really one of those things where personally for me, I'm 30, right? And I'm still relatively young when compared to other people. But I do feel like my life experiences have taught me how to get what I want in the way that I want it in a matter that I'm okay with, as opposed to, being told what to do. That can have severe effects on somebody's psyche and someone's happiness and whatnot. And so I definitely do feel like there needs to be, even if the label route continues to stay the same, there needs to be more of an effort to help younger artists find themselves and, understand what choices they're making better. That I can get, I can get on board with that. That's for sure.
Right. I agree.
Awesome, man. Dude, I really appreciate you being honest in this conversation. I had no idea where we were going to go.
I like where we went, though. I really do.
I love where we went, man. It's really, really fun. So I want you to take a quick couple minutes. Let me know what you're up to, man. I mean, I know we're still technically in lockdown. I know some people are starting to plan out some shows. I don't know what you're doing, but let me know what you got. Do you have an EP? Do you have a single? Do you have some performances coming out soon? Let me know.
Yeah. So I just released a song on October 30th with this amazing artist from LA called Mayella. She is brilliant, really, and her pen is amazing. Her voice is amazing, and I'm very happy to be a part of that song. It's called Phases. It's out on all platforms. I released a song in August called "Move Until You're Numb." That is a song with this production duo called Mixtape Soul. They're amazing. I'm happy with that song. It's an up-tempo song. It'll make you feel good. That's why I wrote it, to make me feel good. So hopefully it'll make you feel good as well. And I'm just sitting on a bunch of music that I'm trying to piece together so I can put out an album next year. So that's the goal, is to put out an album next year. Hopefully one, if not two, if not three. We'll see how things go.
I love it, man. I can't wait to check it out. I'll go ahead and play a snippet of your latest song here in this marker. And to end things off, for some of the people out there who are independent artists, maybe they're experiencing some successes like you, or something along the lines of what you're doing, and they want to be doing what you're doing. What is something that you can recommend younger artists or up and coming artists, or even older artists who want to start, in their mid-30s or whatever? Yeah. Is there anything you would recommend somebody to always do, to remember, something to inspire them by? I always like to end the show with something a little bit inspirational.
Sure. So I think the most important thing for any artist to remember is that one, you have to be true to yourself and write the music that you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, no one else will enjoy it. The other thing that I would recommend if you're an independent artist is you need capital. This is ultimately getting your music out to an audience is a business. It requires capital. You need to at least be able to market on Instagram and Facebook, unless you go viral on TikTok. And the odds of that happening are relatively slim. So if you want to be heard, if you want your music to be heard by other people, you need some money to be able to do that. So either work a job, advance in a career and save up money, or try to find outside investors, whether it's your family or actual investors who can help you push it. That gets lost sometimes, and I hope everyone understands that it doesn't just happen magically. It does take some work and some investment on your part. And the last thing I'll say is continue to self-study. Get as good as you possibly can, writing songs, making music. Never stop. If you want to be great at it, you need to continue working to be the best you possibly can.
Hell yeah, man. Great words of inspiration. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on the show. I really love it. You're an amazing artist. You're an amazing singer. Super inspirational.
Thank you, man.
And I can't wait to see where your career takes you, man.
This was a lot of fun. This was one of my favorite podcasts that I've done. So thank you so much.